Ahead on Face the State, the race for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate. 3 candidates going head-to-head and toe-to-toe. State Senator Matt Dolan, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, and businessman Bernie Moreno. Today, an extensive interview with Senator Dolan, focusing on domestic and foreign policy, from security at the southern border and abortion to the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Hamas. Senator Matt Dolan on the issues, now on Face the State. Thanks for joining us this Sunday morning for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Voters are already casting their ballots in Ohio's March 19th presidential primary. Early voting started last Wednesday across the state. It runs through March 17th. One of the biggest contests they'll be deciding is who will be the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate. Democratic U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown is running for his 4th term representing Ohio. He is unopposed in the Democratic primary. 3 Republicans are vying to be the candidate to challenge him in the November general election. The very high-profile race pits State Senator Matt Dolan, Secretary of State Frank LaRose, and businessman Bernie Moreno against each other for the Republican nomination. Political ads for this race are running in heavy rotation on TV, radio, and online. I wanted to delve deeper into their stances on some of the key issues affecting Ohioans, Americans, and the world. So I've invited all of them to discuss their positions and ideas here on Face the State. Secretary LaRose will be my guest next Sunday. I've also reached out to the Moreno campaign and am waiting to hear back. This past week, I talked with Senator Dolan for nearly a half hour. Dolan is serving his 2nd term in the state Senate and is the chairman of the Finance Committee. He's a lawyer who previously served 3 terms in the Ohio House. His family owns the Cleveland Guardians Major League Baseball team. We talked about a wide range of topics surrounding domestic and foreign policy and national security, starting with immigration and the southern border. Well, Senator, one of the big issues that we see all the time in the news as well as in the political ads is about securing the southern border. What, as a U.S. Senator, would you do to secure the southern border? Yeah, well, I think your question is all the time. You could have said that for the last 30 years. The border has been an issue for the last 30 years. Under the Biden administration, it's gone from an issue to an absolute crisis. And so as a result of that, we need to take some measures that may actually get done. And that is, we must secure and seal our border. Now, drastically, that means for a period of time, we must seal the border, which means we're temporarily suspending immigration into this country. Totally. Immigration, not tourism, not trade. Right. But here's what we're doing in that short period of time. We're building more wall where necessary. We're getting Border Patrol back up to the numbers they should be at, because under Biden, they've been reduced to 50% less. Give them law enforcement authority to act. Put the technology where it needs to be. When I was down at the border in Arizona, a lot of the technology that Biden turned off was made right here in Ohio. So it's an economic issue for us as well. We need to get back into the Remain in Mexico program. That means when we start up again, you're not entering this country until your asylum has been approved prior to entering the country. We have to suspend all government aid to the immigrants who are here already. And that may seem drastic in your response, but go back in 1995 and President Clinton in his State of the Union address said the exact same thing. But how can you just cut off aid to them if they're here and needing to survive? Well, because they're if we secure and seal the border, then they're able to get H-1 and B-1 work visas, or H-2 or B-2 or anything. There's other equivalents thereof, but only when we secure our border, because we have to partly the incentive to get here is what's driving a lot of this immigration. I mean, if California right now is providing free health care for illegal immigrants. Now, I know in Ohio, there's folks that are struggling without health care, and but yet money's going to them. Then look, there's a lot we have to get done. Then we have to go to Mexico City
and say, look, that aid and that trade that we're working with you on, look, that could be suspended too if you're not going to help us defeat the cartels. And then finally, the fentanyl has to be declared a weapon of mass destruction. That's not a campaign slogan. That means we can stop ships coming from China that are bringing the product that the cartels are making the fentanyl into our country.
Would you support any level of amnesty?
Well, you know, amnesty in this campaign has been defined a whole lot of ways. And again, what this means is Remain in Mexico is an amnesty program. It just simply means you are not entering our country until your amnesty's been approved. So you either stay in Mexico or you stay in your host country. What's happening today is anyone just claiming amnesty is welcomed in, and then they say your hearing's not for another 2 years. Mm-hmm. So they're just in our country, and we don't know who they are. We don't know if they intend to do their hearings. Would
you have supported the bipartisan deal that almost got through Congress?
So I support the idea of people working together to try to solve a problem. But as I mentioned before, this is now a crisis. It's not an issue anymore. So when the Democrats finally, came out with a bill that had Republican support, mm-hmm. that continued to allow some form of immigration to occur, whether you call it encounters, whether you call it crossovers, it didn't matter. That's a non-starter right now, because of all the things we just talked about. Is we have got to get our security up to speed, and we're not there. So I think a temporary suspension of immigration, which is what House Bill 2 or H.R. 2 would have done for a period of time until we get everything else done, I think has more of a chance to pass. Because why it hasn't fixed in 30 years is because everyone wants to talk about absolutely every issue regarding immigration, and as a result, nothing gets done and our border remains open.
I'm going to switch topics now to another big national topic as well, of course, as here in Ohio. You're pro-life. You have said you'd support a federal limit on access to abortion. What would your limit be for access?
Well, first let's back up. So I'm pro-life, and I agree with I accept the 3 exceptions: life of the mother, rape, and incest. And what I have said is, if what's happening, I respect Ohio voters that that's what they want. But in the last election, we passed a bill a law that allows for late-term abortion, which is really abortion anytime during the pregnancy. I do not support that. And so if I saw that happening all across the country, that we're basically having abortion on demand, then I would look to a federal relief and say that I think what's happening in our country is not in step with what most Americans want to see happen.
So you wouldn't push for that right off the bat?
No.
You've said you'd support what Ohio voters wanted. It was 57 to 43%. Mm-hmm. So is that top of mind on this issue for you going forward, and besides what you're talking about with the late term?
I think as Republicans, we better understand our state, and I do. And what the issue 1 vote is the Ohioans are saying we want a period of time upon which abortion is available. And we want the 3 exceptions as part of that plan. That's what Ohioans, I think, voted for. I don't think they understood the late-term abortion of it. That reflects my pro-life career, which has also reduced abortions by 37%. Sherrod Brown wants to make this race about abortion because he knows my opponents have called for, Frank LaRose has called for a 6-week national ban. Bernie Moreno has said no exceptions whatsoever. I think those are out of step with what Ohioans showed that they wished for in issue 1, and therefore they're going to have a hard time against Sherrod Brown. I think Sherrod Brown, if he makes the race about abortion with me, then he's going to have to defend why he's for on-demand abortion, why he voted against the Save a Child Born Alive Act, why he wants your taxpayer dollars to go to pay for abortions. So I think my career is pro-life that reflects the majority of Ohioans.
Who do you support for president?
Well, I think Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, and that's who I'll support.
Do you worry about his age, about President Biden's age?
Look, that's for the voters to decide. I mean, that's what our system is the two parties seem to be nominating these two gentlemen, and that's why we have a vote, and people will decide, are these gentlemen. I know this, is that President Trump has been looked at 100 different ways by 1,000, feels like 1,000 different prosecutors, and not a single one said he doesn't have the mental capacity to defend himself. One special prosecutor looks at President Biden and says, we're not even going to pursue charges because we're afraid about his ability to defend himself.
Do you believe that with all of the charges that President Trump does face in the different cases, criminal and civil, that he should be disqualified, or should he be able to keep running?
Yeah, well, again, that's what elections are for. There is no disqualifying event, according to our Constitution, in any of these cases. What will happen is the voters will decide whether or not what's happening in those cases is that an impediment or not. But he's not barred from running because of these cases. And I think at the end of the day, I think they're going to see the direction of our country under President Biden is not going in the right direction. People feel it. I know it. I travel the state. It's $11,000 more per family in this state because of the Biden administration. So I think those will be the issues that people ultimately will be voting on.
So what is it that you do see as the greatest threat to the economy?
Well, it's a continued role of government spending. Because that will continue to drive the inflation up. That if the government spending also deflates the incentive to work, I think what's going to happen is you're going to drive businesses away from our country again because we won't have the workforce necessary. So I think what we have to do is get back to what I've done in Ohio. And in my time as a state senator and legislature, I've cut taxes, I've reduced regulations, expanded school choice, invested in infrastructure, did the things that make it possible for businesses and families to thrive. I mean, Intel is here in a large part because of the work that Governor DeWine has done and I've done in the legislature. We need to create that nationwide. So manufacturing and producers want to come back to the United States. That creates economic activity. That's what will provide for stronger family, for stronger wages. That's where we have to get back to, not looking to see if the government's going to solve all our problems.
You talked about the rising expenses. What can be done about affordable housing, inflation, the cost of living? Yeah,
well, as I said, first thing you need to do, you create an economic engine. And that is you make the United States a place where businesses, small businesses, large businesses want to thrive. We've done it in Ohio. I want to go to the United States Senate and produce the same. Then workforce development. Again, we do a pretty good job here in Ohio. We need to expand that to the United States so that manufacturers know. Housing is an issue. And if we don't, there's two things we have to accomplish there. Again, if you let economic activity grow, the interest rates will come down. It makes it more affordable. And then what we've done in Ohio is we've looked at the problem and said, okay, we're going to provide housing tax credits to encourage the building of single-family homes. We're going to give tax credits for the refurbishing of single-family homes. We're going to give tax credits for multi-tenant homes to recognize that we want young couples to buy a home. We want factories and manufacturers to come here and say, look, my workers have a place to go, and that's what we've done with Intel. So, you let the private sector lead, and the government will supplement where necessary. Whereas under Brown and Biden, they lead with the government at the expense of the private sector.
What can be done about gun violence on the federal level?
Yeah, first of all, understand that I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment says that you have an absolute right to own a gun. And I have supported that my entire career. But I also have said that we need to look at, do suicidal and homicidal individuals, should they have the right to purchase a gun? Should we not recognize that a vast majority of these crimes are being done by individuals who legally should not have had that gun in the first place? And they get it done through what's called straw purchasing. Mm-hmm. That's what I've been trying to talk about. And I think as Republicans, we better recognize that there are individuals who are owning guns who we should be able to say, without violating the Second Amendment, yeah, we should probably make sure criminals who are violent or have drug convictions shouldn't have guns. And there are things we could have done, and I introduced a bill that would have done that.
Do you support things like red flag laws or stricter background checks with that in mind?
Yeah, so red flags law is another one of those words that just gets the multiple interpretations. What I support is the idea that if suicidal and homicidal individuals, if we can get them the help necessary, we should get them the help before they have the ability to go purchase a gun and commit to tragedy. That's what I support. And every time these tragedies occur, we rightly say mental health is a portion of this. Well, I just didn't talk about it. I did something. In Ohio, you're going to see 6 regional mental health crisis centers appear all over the state. And that is designed to make sure we get individuals help before they commit a tragedy. It's also a result of me going around listening to sheriffs, because we have 20% of our jails are filled with folks who haven't committed a crime, but they need mental help. And we have nowhere else to put them. So now we have a place to put them, so that the law enforcement officers are acting as law enforcement officers. Our jails are putting those folks who have incarceration who have committed a crime. So it is not just talking about it, it's actually doing things about it.
Those are Senator Dolan's stances on a few of the big domestic issues. Up next, our conversation continues on foreign policy, including the danger Russia opposes and what America's role should be in Ukraine and Israel as conflicts continue to rage on. Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Today we're focusing on the race for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Ohio and my interview with one of the 3 candidates, State Senator Matt Dolan of Chagrin Falls in the Cleveland area. Now we turn to his stances on some of the big foreign policy issues, starting with Russia. Last week we learned of the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in a Russian penal colony. Do you believe Vladimir Putin is responsible?
Oh, of course. I mean, the fact that he's in a penal colony in the first place is because of Putin. So we have to understand in America, Putin is not our friend. He is our adversary. He is our enemy. And that we have to understand as America that let's just talk about the Ukrainian situation. We made an agreement with Ukraine in 1994. Hey, you dismantle your nuclear weapons. And in return, we understand that if Russia were to invade, we will provide conventional weapons for you. Well, in 1994, we knew Russia could be a problem. Well, in 2022, it showed it is a problem. And, America, we need to understand this is about our security, because our allies and our enemies know that the world's safer if America keeps its promises.
So how dangerous is the Putin-led Russia?
It's extremely dangerous. It's dangerous both in terms of our security and our economy. It's dangerous with our security because if we roll over and allow Putin to win in Ukraine, first of all, we've lost a sovereign nation. Second of all, Ohio boys and girls are going to be sent to Poland. They're going to be sent to the Baltics to defend NATO. I have 2 nephews in the armed services right now. I mean, Ukraine's not asking for American men and women. They're asking for ammunition. President Trump gave them ammunition. President Obama and Biden gave them blankets until the invasion. So making a strong Ukraine with ammunition and weapons is best interest of America. And by the way, there's also a lot of the dollars, over 60%, staying right here in the United States.
Well, there's big debate right now in Congress about whether to continue funding Ukraine. Would you support those efforts to keep that money flowing and the military aid as well?
Yeah, so that's important. Yes, the military aid, weapons and ammunition, that's what they need. Should we have better accounting? Should the Biden administration be better? Yes. But I do not believe that we should abandon the Ukrainians. I mean, they're at dire straits right now. I mean, we can't afford Putin to win. We also, if you send me to Washington, we also have to get our domestic budgeting in order. And so we haven't had a budget now, and I think it's been like 20-some years. And, no family, no business does that. We don't do it in the state. I've balanced 4 budgets. They've been called the most conservative budgets in Ohio history. We can do the same thing in Washington. That allows the Americans to understand where is all my tax dollars going.
You might have to make a constitutional amendment to make that happen in Washington, like there is here in Ohio.
Yeah, but also you could start the process by having a budget process and calling in the agency and say, how are you spending your money? mean, it's pretty basic.
Yeah. What should America's role be, and where do you think that this conflict, the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas should go?
Yeah, well, first, we have to recognize that Israel has the absolute right to defend itself against an Iranian-backed terrorist organization. This is not two countries. Hamas and Hezbollah are terrorist organizations. And so there will never be peace in that region, and Israel will never feel safe if Hamas is allowed to continue. So our role is to allow them to do that, to provide, as they request, defensive and offensive weapons. But our role is a little more expanded in the Middle East, because I do think we have a responsibility to be present, because this is really a proxy war, and Iran wants to flex his muscles. And if America continues to show weakness, and by the way, allowing Putin to win in Ukraine is weakness that Iran will take advantage of. So we need to have a presence there.
What about the innocent people in Gaza?
It's terrible. It's a terrible, war's horrible. But the reality is Hamas, if they continue to exist, we won't advance the peace that we need to do in the Middle East. I mean, look, part of this is because the Abraham Accords that President Trump did. You know, making some of these Arab countries more economically viable so young men and women can look to their own future instead of saying, I need to get radicalized. Israel and the Saudi Arabia were on the verge of also having an agreement that this terrorist act disrupted. So it is horrible what's happening in Palestine, and the people are suffering. I don't minimize that, but the suffering's not going to end if Hamas continues.
Still ahead on Face the State, a final thought from State Senator Matt Dolan on what his first year in office would look like if he wins the Senate race.
We need to send somebody to Washington who wants to take ownership of these issues, because no other business can you just blame someone else for why something doesn't get done.
Finally today, I asked Senator Dolan if he wins the race for Senate, what would be the focus of his first year in office? Would he sit back and learn or dive right in?
That's the thing with me. I have the most experience, so I will get in immediately. And the two things I want to focus on are securing our border, as we talked about at the top, and we need to make sure that our fiscal house gets in order. You don't spend more than you bring in. It's what we do in Ohio. It's what you do at your house. That's what we're going to do in Washington. And that does mean making very difficult decisions. But one thing I think Ohioans know about me is that throughout my career, whether it be in the private or public sector, I make the difficult decisions that at the end of the day are in the best interest of Ohio. They're not always in my best political career, trust me. But I think we need to send somebody to Washington who wants to take ownership of these issues, because no other business can you just blame someone else for why something doesn't get done. So I'm telling folks, let me take ownership of these issues and we'll get them done.
One of Dolan's opponents in the race for the Republican Senate nomination, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, will be my guest next Sunday here on Face the State. I've also reached out to the Marino campaign for an interview and am waiting to hear back. Thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30.